So about a month ago, I got my wisdom teeth removed, and I was trying to find something to watch in the living room that would be appropriate for my preteen brother to watch. So naturally, I introduced him to Arrested Development.
I know you're the big marriage expert. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Your wife is dead.
I'm a great brother. But after watching through its first season, I started looking for something new to watch. I settled on this show called Scrubs, a popular medical sitcom that follows a trio of medical students becoming interns at the same hospital. I thought the show was alright at first. It had pleasant characters and had an aggressively 2000s presentation that I'm currently feeling very nostalgic for, but I didn't really fully click with the comedy. Mainly because there were a lot of overly cartoony sound effects and frequent cutaway gags that I just didn't particularly find hilarious. However, that all changed when I watched episode 4, My Old Lady. I was absolutely floored when I watched it and have been wanting to talk about it since. So I guess that's what I'm gonna do now. Like I said before, Scrubs follows 3 hospital interns trying to navigate their way around life as medical professionals. John Dorian, or JD, is our protagonist, portrayed by famous actor Zach Braff. He's an idealistic guy who wants to be a good doctor who connects with his patients, finds a doctoral mentor, and builds relationships with his coworkers. But he is hit with the realities of the medical world here at Sacred Heart Hospital. He's also highly imaginative. We see the whole show through his eyes, providing a vessel for the cutaway gags that the show is known for, and while I wasn't a huge fan of them at first, they started getting funnier as the show goes on, and I started to gain an appreciation for how they depict JD's vision of the world. Or we just get some intrusive thoughts. He's accompanied by his best friend and originator of the default dance, Christopher Turk, portrayed by Donald Faison, who's a surgery intern. He's a typical jock who shares a love of movies with his friend. He begins dating a nurse named Carla, a hard-willed woman who offers plenty of guidance to JD and Elliot as they adjust to their jobs. Speaking of Elliot, she's the third intern the show follows. Portrayed by Sarah Chalk, the voice of Beth Sanchez, Elliot Reed is a girl constantly fighting to earn her place at the hospital. She carries heavy expectations for herself and she struggles to meet them. She's very indecisive and she tends to socially isolate herself thanks to her awkwardness. However, she does manage to find friendship with JD and Turk. The rest of the main cast consists of Perry Cox, a very blunt senior doctor at Sacred Heart who will stop at nothing to treat every patient he gets, even to the extent of clashing with board members. He's a hard-nosed drill sergeant type who doesn't really like to form deeper relationships with his staff. He has his foil in Bob Kelso, the chief medical doctor whose concern is mainly invested in Sacred Heart as a business. He tends to treat his underlings with contempt and his patients as moneybags. Oh, and then there's the janitor. He doesn't really like JD. With all that groundwork laid out, let's jump into the episode. My Old Lady starts with Elliot and Carla arguing about Carla not being invited to a symphony. JD naturally wants to jump in and sort this out, but Turk, ever the expert in the way of women, tells him not to. JD ignores this smart advice.
You got something to say?
Well, yes, frankly, I think that you're being condescending and you're being overly sensitive.
You know,
it's
really
ironic
interesting
that you're accusing me of being condescending.
Women, am I right? He internally rewinds this moment and tries again.
Well, yes, frankly, I think that you're being condescending and you're being overly sensitive.
Men, am I right? Even when we think things through, we still go on our first instinct. Moving on to the main plot of the episode, I absolutely love how this sweeping long take establishes the main players of the episode while JD narrates about how he was once told that 1 out of every 3 patients admitted to a hospital will die. It's some nice visual symmetry that effectively communicates everything we can expect from the episode in about 30 seconds. It also sets up the question of which of these 3 patients will be the one to die. JD gets an elderly woman with a worrywart family. She's immediately endeared to him while her family jumps down his throat. The old lady, named Miss Tanner, is immediately likable as she supports JD in commanding her family around. Also, who doesn't love hard candy? Turk and his fellow surgeons are stuck with a lighthearted young Chiefs fan who tries to invite them to watch some ESPN with him. This episode immediately sets up the idea that the surgeons, including Turk, don't see their patients as people, which is something that the episode will build on. Elliot is given a Spanish-speaking woman, so Carla is assigned to translate for her. Based on the stupid argument they had at the beginning of the episode, neither of them are too happy about this arrangement. JD tries to talk to Turk about Miss Tanner, but the surgery intern can't reciprocate that excitement for his own patient. What was his name again?
His name is Hernia Patient, but we've gotten close, so I like to call him Hernia.
Alright, Hernia. Now, while Turk seems cold here, referring to his patient by his condition rather than as a person, I think he's showing a little uneasiness at the idea of any sort of familiarity with his patients. Elliot still can't speak Spanish, which Carla holds over her head. She holds a bit of resentment at Elliot since she was lucky enough to go to a fancy medical school. This seems to be rooted in a bit of class disparity and jealousy, as it was hinted at in the cold open and in the previous episodes.
She's from El Barrio, she must not like music.
All I'm saying is that classical music isn't for everyone.
Meanwhile, Elliot isn't doing herself any favors.
Yeah, like every doctor here speaks Spanish.
Hola, señora Guerrero. ¿Cómo se siente hoy?
Dr. Cox berates her for calling him in for a very rudimentary medical treatment, which is a result of Elliot's insecurity in her own abilities.
Every time I see your Cupid doll face, it just makes me want to pick you up and shake you until all the hours of my life that you've wasted fall out.
Huh, man, I love Cox. Wait, that didn't come out right. JD shows Dr. Kelso Miss Tanner's charts while the janitor threatens to murder him. Why? Well, that's alarming. What's even more alarming is that Miss Tanner has escaped. Freedom! No, she actually just went to the park. She's attending the birthday party of Santa Claus's niece, and she manages to tempt JD into staying for cake. However, that doesn't hold him off for too long, and he's eventually had enough. No, I'm kidding, that doesn't happen. He helps the kid blow out her birthday candle so he can get Miss Tanner back to the hospital. There, JD tells her that her kidneys have stopped responding to her medication, so she'll have to go on dialysis, which she isn't a fan of.
I think I'm ready to die.
Hernia is still trying to talk football with people and finally finds someone in Turk. They start bonding, progressing to wheelchair bowling. Unfortunately, while operating on him later, Turk finds some lymphoma growth. On a happy note, though, the walls between Carla and Elliot start to break down thanks to some Spanish lessons and sex talk.
I guess I don't have what you would call high self-esteem.
You don't say. They find that their Spanish-speaking patient's OSAT is in the 80s, which means that there's something wrong with her blood. And with that, we hit the halfway point of this episode. Each of our main characters have on some level bonded with their patients. JD loves Miss Tanner and is overly protective of her. Turk has finally opened himself up to Hernia, and Miss Guerrero has helped Elliot and Carla bond together. Now all three of these patients face morbid fates. JD handles this news poorly.
Everybody dies sometime.
No, they don't.
He refuses to accept the reality of death. He goes to his mentor, Dr. Cox, for guidance.
You are afraid of death, and you can't be.
And here we establish that JD has to face the fact that death will inevitably win the game of life here on Earth. Or Connect 4. He's still hesitant to face the Tanners, but the threat of murder from the janitor scares him into Miss Tanner's room. He decides to prolong Miss Tanner's death by assigning her a bucket list. Turns out Miss Tanner is a well-traveled woman, which, while funny, also reveals how full of a life she has lived. She turns the bucket list around on JD, asking him how many of those things he's done.
How many times you've sat on the grass and done nothing,
She makes him promise to take some time for himself and enjoy life. She gives him a comfort hug before he leaves. Man, this is such a good moment. Miss Tanner's the one dying, but because she lived such a full life, she's at peace with it, while JD's overwhelming fear of death has extended to those around him. He can't even face the death of a woman he's known for under a day, and that very woman is there to comfort him about it.
Oh my god, are you crying?
No, it's just raining.
Turk at first seems to be handling the news of Hernia's lymphoma quite well. Now that he's gotten to know his patient a bit more, I guess we should call Turk's friend by his actual name.
David, right?
Turk is berated by Dr. Kelso for bowling his patient down the hallway.
Patients don't need friends, they need a doctor.
Despite that gentle advice, Turk continues to hang out with David, but he avoids the serious topic of his lymphoma. Eventually, David weighs him down and Turk has to deliver the bad news. Meanwhile, Miss Guerrero's condition is worsening, causing Elliot to panic, second-guessing her decisions and trying to get Carla to make a decision for her. All Carla has to offer is...
She needs to know what's going on.
But Elliot can't bring herself to do that. Carla finds her hiding in the break room and struggling to make a decision on what drink to get. In order to convince Elliot to return to Miss Guerrero, Carla admits that the resentment for her came from the fact that Elliot is incredibly talented at being a doctor, depriving Carla of her status as the only smart and strong woman at Sacred Heart. Dang, way to throw your fellow women under the bus here. Still, this helps Elliot finally make a decision with confidence. Oh, and she finally knows how to treat Miss Guerrero. Unfortunately, one by one our characters have to witness their patient die. Miss Tanner peacefully passes away, David's surgery fails to rid him of lymphoma, and Elliot's treatment isn't enough to save Miss Guerrero. JD has to face his fear of death in person and then tell the Tanners of the loss of their matriarch. Turk has to face David's father, who thanks him for being his son's friend, and Elliot is reassured of her decision by Cox. The episode subverts the expectation it sets up for us in order to allow our characters to learn life lessons and grow. Honestly, this is a prime example of properly subverting expectations. I'm not still mad. JD's closing monologue starts as Turk befriends another patient. Elliot is confidently commanding her nurses, and he himself just lies in the grass thinking about all that he has left to do in life. Each one of them has faced death and came out the other side better for it. Oh man, this episode is great. It does such a great job at transitioning from a wacky comedy into a more serious look at the emotional weight doctors have to carry with them while still retaining the unique comedic flair the show is known for. Each of our three main characters have to confront their fears in relation to death. Elliot has to confront her insecure indecisiveness. She can't bring herself to make a decision because that decision might be the cause of a patient's death. She freezes when she can't make a decision regarding Miss Guerrero and is only able to do so thanks to Carla reassuring her abilities. Unlike other instances of characters being affirmed in their abilities, Elliot still has character flaws that she struggles to overcome, and Carla is the one to help her, which is satisfying to see after their bickering earlier in the episode. Trying to save Mrs. Guerrero allows the ladies to grow closer to one another. In the end, Carla is able to overcome her own biases and Elliot is able to become more decisive. Even though Mrs. Guerrero died, Elliot made the right decision on her treatment and is able to move forward confident in her decisions. Turk is uneasy about befriending his patients, likely because he doesn't want to get close to someone whose life he holds in his hands. He accidentally starts bonding with David over sports, and the two become close over the course of the day. When he discovers David's lymphoma, Turk can't bring himself to tell him the bad news, preferring to wait until David's father arrives. Eventually, he has to tell his friend the bad news, and David dies in surgery. However, David's father provides closure in the fact that Turk gave his son a friend on his final day on Earth. He finds purpose in giving his patients a friend while they're being treated, so he continues to reach out to them instead of retreating back into being a callous observer. JD is the one who has to most directly face death. He has a desire to help all of his patients and is terrified of them dying. However, he receives a patient who is perfectly content with her death. In fact, that's what she wants. Miss Tanner has lived a full life with people she loves and is ready to finish her race. Ironically, it is the patient who has to comfort the doctor in the face of death. JD has to accept the reality of death, especially working as a doctor, and take time away from his work to enjoy life. He has to come to terms with the fact that everything he does as a doctor is only prolonging the inevitable. And the sooner he does, the better doctor he will be because of it. This is reinforced by one of my favorite moments in the episode.
You're in medicine. You gotta accept the fact that everything we do here, everything, is a stall. We're just trying to keep the game going. That's it. But ultimately, it always ends up the same way.
But the episode as a whole preaches a message that is applicable to more than just doctors. Death is an important part of life here on Earth. In fact, it helps give that purpose. Earthly life is precious because it ends. We can either be fearful of it, shutting ourselves off from the outside world and paralyzing ourselves into indecisiveness, or we can choose to make the most of our life because death will inevitably come, most of the time sooner than we think. There's a purpose to our lives, and it's up to us to find it. Whether it's big picture missions of following God, saving lives, making the world a better place, etc., or taking each day at a time, being confident in your decisions, making a new friend, or just lying in the grass and thinking of all the things left to do in life, you can find purpose out there. I love how some of the silliest sitcoms are capable of delivering the most emotional moments in television and some poignant messages about life. That's the power of comedy right there. Episode 4, Season 1 of Scrubs is a shining example of that, and that's why it's my favorite episode of the show thus far. Granted, I've only seen Season 1 of the show so far, so if you have any episode recommendations, let me know in the comments what I have to look forward to. Also, let me know if you like this style of video where I talk about a specific episode of a more episodic show. And while you're down there, allow me to offer one last piece of advice. Leave a like, hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this or other stuff I might put out. Then put down the phone or turn off the computer and go outside, maybe make a new friend, or just chill and enjoy life. It is far too short to be terminally online. Personally, I think I may go for a walk after this. Life is an adventure, and I'm so glad you're on this journey with me. Stay blessed. Thanks for watching.